Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yep, you never saw it coming.
Hey, Happy New Year, Genies. It is great to be back, and welcome to Extreme Genes, America's family history show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Well, we're going to start out the year with some great guests today because we're going to find out about enslaved.org. It's a brand new website, and I'm going to talk to Daryl Williams. He's one of the key people there, and they're actually funneling all these incredible databases about enslaved people and enslavers, and this covers the entire world, by the way, and this is something that you may be able to contribute to in the future so that people can discover stories about these individuals. Plus, later in the show, I'm going to talk to Rachel Darenthal. She's a project manager with Legacy Tree Genealogists. She's going to be talking about the 1890 census records. As most of us know, it didn't go well in that fire in 1921. So how do you make up for that? How do you cover that gap in time? She'll tell us all about it. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, hey, it's a new year. Get on it. It's free. Just go to ExtremeGenes.com. You can find the link there or through our Facebook page. And you'll get a blog from me each week, plus links to past and present shows and links to stories you'll be fascinated by as a genealogist. Right now, for the first time in 2021, we head out to Boston, Massachusetts for David Allen Lambert, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
Happy New Year. How you doing?
I am doing great. Did you make any great discoveries over the holidays?
Just a lot more genealogy redos, kind of looking at stuff I did years ago and just getting a lot of stuff for the basket. Good. I guess that makes me a basket case.
I guess that makes you a basket case. You always have been. Well, David, let's get on with our family histoire news because we got a lot of ground to cover in this first show of 2021.
We do, and unfortunately, the first thing I want to mention is the passing of human geneticist Brian Sykes of Oxford Ancestors. Brian was the author of Seven Daughters of Eve. He was one of the pioneering geneticists that brought us ways of finding our own DNA through Oxford Ancestors. So Brian passed away. He was a good friend and colleague to many, and so sorry to hear that news. Staying with England news, Richard III, I think you were talking about it on Extreme Genes before I was even associated with it.
Oh, yeah. Richard III is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, there are more stories surrounding him ever since he was found underneath a parking lot in England. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah. And I think the royal family probably wishes he had not been found underneath the parking lot because a latest story you'll find on ExtremeGenes.com is going to be the story about how the royal bloodline may not be legitimate, as DNA has now proven that even from the Tudor family, the time of Henry VIII, down to the royal family, there was a non-paternity event. Oh, big surprise.
Really?
There.
What a shocker. That you mean royal family members? Stop it.
Oh, no. And actually, that brings me to a side note that one of the things I was working on during the break is my application to descendants of the illegitimate sons and daughters of the kings of Britain, or better known as the royal bastards.
Yes, that's right. That's what they're called. Yeah. That's the name of the organization.
Yeah. There's only been 400 members in the 70 years plus now that the organization has existed, and I have a line from King Henry II's known illegitimate son, William Longsby, who was the Earl of Salisbury. Kind of fun, something else to do,
Yeah, fill your days, David.
Exactly. And I suppose with genealogy, it keeps us up at night, but you may have a family member or maybe yourself has had a sleepwalking incident. It actually may have something to do with our early ancestors as sort of a defense mechanism to survive during the times when we were not living at home with alarms.
That's interesting. I wonder if a DNA test where you cover all those tendencies would reveal if you had the gene for sleepwalking. My wife does it. I got a daughter who does it. That's fascinating.
You know, I love metal detectorist stories because our Lost and Found is always full of somebody finding something. Mark Williams discovered the 1914 British Empire Star Medal that was given to many of the British soldiers during World War I. The nice thing about this metal fish is it has a name on the back. So with the help of a genealogist, he found out that this medal originally belonged to William George Waters, who was born back in 1879, who was a World War I veteran and joined up in the service in 1899. So this medal he's now given back to the grandson.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great gift.
Sometimes you don't have to use a metal detector. A person renovating a house in Toronto, Canada, found 2 diaries of a young 10-year-old girl in Toronto, Canada. Her name was Allison Jenkins, and she never guessed that 37 years later, someone would find her secret diaries still intact. Apparently, they did not open it because the young girl wrote on it, "This book is Allison's do not read private."
Yeah, it's her secret diary right there. And they went crazy on Facebook to find her, and they did locate her, and she was pretty excited to find it. That's got to be a weird thing. I did not keep a journal back when I was a child, but it would be really fun to go back and read some of that stuff, wouldn't it?
It definitely would. I had a pen pal back in Toronto in 1983, and I thought for a minute as I'm reading the story, I said, is that? No, because my pen pal was 14 when I was 14. So I was like, oh, good. The secrets of Dave Lambert as a teenager will not be revealed. Lost to history. Well, you know, one of the things I find very puzzling during the pandemic is the infatuation people now have with puzzles.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Apparently, this is something that actually happened back during the Depression and back during the pandemic a century ago. There's just this boom in people doing jigsaw puzzles. And of course, I think maybe there's a connection between the incredible increase in interest in family history and puzzles, because it's really the same thing, right? Taking clues and putting them together and making a picture, right?
Exactly. Well, that's all I have for you from Beantown this week. But don't forget, if you haven't visited AmericanAncestors.org and been more than a guest member, you can use the coupon code EXTREME and save $20 on membership and become a full member and use over 1.25 billion searchable records on AmericanAncestors.org. Talking to you real soon on the back end of the show.
Exactly, for Ask Us Anything. And coming up next, we're going to talk to Daryl Williams. He's one of the key people at enslaved.org, a brand new website that's revealing all kinds of information about millions of lost people. That's when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. You know, whether you're new to family history, a seasoned pro, or you've simply missed the event in years past, now's your chance to connect at Roots Tech Connect, the world's largest family history conference. For the first time ever, this event is 100% virtual and 100% free. That's right, virtual and free. Now you can discover your heritage from wherever you are. Imagine 3 full days of discovery, dozens of classes to choose from, taught by presenters from around the world, all from the comfort of your couch. Oh, and don't forget the exciting celebrations of music, food, dance, and traditions from around the globe. Enjoy inspiring keynote addresses and learn from top-notch speakers, and see yourself in the story of the human family. Discover your story. Discover Roots Tech Connect. Live online February 25th through 27th, 2021. Register for free at rootstech.org. That's Roots Tech Connect, free at rootstech.org.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Well, Happy New Year's, Genies, and welcome back to Extreme Genes. I'm really excited to have as my first guest of the new year, Daryl Williams out of Washington, D.C. He is the co-principal investigator out of the University of Maryland for a brand new website called enslaved.org. And this is a site that is going to be second to none when it comes to gathering all the information about enslaved people of the Americas and the enslavers as well, something we can all participate in as time goes on. And Daryl, welcome to Extreme Genes. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much, Scott. Happy New Year to you.
So when did this get started? Who's involved in it? And how's it coming so far?
Well, we launched our website, enslaved.org, back on December 1st, but that was a culmination of several years of work in Matrix, which is a digital humanities center at Michigan State, and a great technical team there, as well as a series of partner research projects in the United States and in the world, who have been working toward trying to build together individual databases and data sets about enslaved people, the lives of enslaved people, but also with a goal to link them to be able to see across multiple data sets and be able to discover individuals. And so that work and those conversations have been going on for several years now. We do have the support of the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and that work has been supported by Mellon Foundation for about 3 years or so. And that's really been able to catalyze the type of work that we brought together on public launch on December 1st.
Well, I'm looking at the numbers here. It's fantastic already. You're up to almost 400,000 people. And from our conversation before we started taping here, I mean, you're really moving a lot faster than that. You're going to hit 500,000 here before long. And then you got events, 212,000. I mean, this is almost like a very mature site right from the launch.
That's the goal, to be able to provide people with some real content, but also to imagine what the possibilities are and to do some discovery, but also to imagine what could happen if we are able to use this technology protocol called linked open data, along with more content, the type of content which comes from academic researchers, the type of content which comes from family historians, genealogists, people in museums and libraries who are interested in contributing to this project. And contributing can be, submitting a data set and putting that through a peer review process for those people who are in the academic side, but it can also be, especially from the community, shall we say, people who are not in higher education, to make the work that they have done more accessible or available through what we're calling community submissions.
And I would imagine that this all has come together because you had these partnerships in place before you even started, because you couldn't possibly have this kind of content since December 1st.
Sure, that's absolutely true. So each project, Voyages, which is probably the most well-known slave trade database, which has been in some version since the 1970s, to some fresher projects, Slave Society's Digital Archive, which is at Vanderbilt, among others. But each of these different projects have been developing the work that they've been doing on their own. But one of the challenges have been that they haven't been in coordination, even if there's some shared interests. So we've been trying to pull those together and having a set of conversations over the last several years about how to make this possible. And then, of course, building the technology to try to make it possible.
So this is basically a big funnel, bringing everybody kind of together to put it all in one place. So we're able to sort it and maybe determine some stories, yes?
Yes, I mean, that is one of the things that we're really interested. So we know that some users will be academics. You're interested in the experience of enslaved women in South Carolina in the 1780s. So you would go and be able to browse by region, South Carolina, by time period, 1780s, by gender. And so that's one way. We also know people are interested in whether they're doing this for academic work or for family history work, genealogical work, looking for individuals. And so they go in and type in a name, Maria, Juana, Alexandra, maybe in South Carolina, and so they're looking for a specific person and see what's there. But we are hoping that this will be a place where stories of enslaved persons' lives will be fuller, more fully visible as the various pieces of those lives, which may have been fractured through the historical process and the archives, are then put back together, at least put together, but also sometimes to find one source or multiple sources, really some pretty interesting stories. So I can give you an example of something from my own research, which is on 19th century Brazilian Slave Society. There's a register which is developed by the British consul in Rio in 1849 to 1851. His name is Robert Hesketh. And the very first entry in this register is that he's approached by an African male who's unnamed, who's complaining about his poor treatment. And one of the things that the consul registers is that this male, who he doesn't name, has a wooden leg based on an injury. So here we have this person, they have the conversation there. Well, in this registry that I then put in a data set, first of all, we have this unusual person who has a wooden leg from a work injury and is complaining about his bad working conditions. But then I came across a runaway ad about a year and a half later, chronologically, which talks about this person named João, that was named, and he worked in the shipyards, and he had a wooden leg. I said, wait a second. This seems possibly this to be the same person. And of course, with the other kind of research I had other places, I was able to piece together a pretty interesting story of someone who arrives in Brazil in 1835 on a slave ship. He's put to this forced apprenticeship, which includes working at the dockyards. He suffers an injury, and he has a peg leg. He gets a wooden leg. So he's working. But at some point in 1849, he decides that he needs to tell his story to the British consul. But then, of course, we have a year and a half later with this story where he runs away, and this kind of curious story of like, how is this person running away, somewhat one would imagine, to be incognito, but yet he has a wooden leg.
Right,
probably
right.
kind of a noticeable, sort of very strong visual.
Sure.
And then about 10, 12 years later, there's another document which certainly suggests that he returned or was returned back to his house where he had this forced apprenticeship. But also he's petitioning for greater autonomy. So here we have this life experience of a boy, illegally enslaved boy, who arrives in Brazil in 1834, all the way up to 1862. Multiple documents written at different times for different purposes, but this person is the constant there. And we begin, even if we don't have him telling his narrative of his life as an illegally enslaved and what's called a free African in Brazil, we have these pieces which we can see portions of his life, including the original registry that I mentioned, which he speaks to the British consul, which is some version of his voice. He didn't write that down, but someone spoke to him and wrote down what that conversation was about. So that's a way to think about someone who would otherwise be anonymous or erased or unnamed, not just has a name, but has a story that we can understand for his own experience. But
that's
also
a chapter in a book right there, right?
Well, why did he run away? Why did he go back?
Right.
Et cetera.
Yeah, there's so much to be found there. So you're not only covering North America as far as enslaved people go, but also South America, where there were more actually than North America, correct?
Oh, sure. Numerically, yeah. Just Brazil itself, it's about 40% or so of the transatlantic slave trade. So, yes, this is global. I don't know if that's ironic or not, but actually what we've started out with has a really strong representation outside the United States. So some of the data sets which are coming in just now have a much stronger reflection of Louisiana and South Carolina and Georgia, et cetera. And we'll be moving into some really interesting data sets coming in from the Mid-Atlantic in the next year or so.
Wow. And what about New England?
We've had the interest and the conversations and the engagement has been really rewarding. And we've had some initial interest and some inquiries from people who've been working with people who were enslaved in the north of what becomes the United States or slaving interest, slave traders and things like this. So we haven't got to the point yet where we're actively looking at any specific data set yet, though there certainly would be people from the north who would be in the slave trade say, voyages, especially captains and things like that. And so I think that this is a next phase for the type of work that we're trying to pull together and activate.
That's awesome. Wow, it sounds really all-encompassing. So if you're a genealogist and you wanted to contribute to enslaved.org, what would they do?
Genealogists first show up, glance on our page, and start browsing around and see what you find and give us some feedback. But I think we do have, as I mentioned, a journal called the Journal of Slavery and Data Preservation, which has two kind of main portals into this world we call the hub, the main site. The journal kind of has two different functions. One is for academics and scholars and researchers. And so people submit data sets that they've developed in their own research, wherever that is, whatever that looks like. And that will be sent out for peer review. And then the data on what's called a data article will be published. That is fantastic for really rigorous, research-driven data work. We do know that there are many people, family historians and genealogists, who are doing this kind of work, but they're not exactly in that peer review academic space. And so we have something called a community submission. And so this would still go through some editorial reviews to make sure that we would be working with information which would be suitable for publication and was ethically identified and sourced and things like this, and that it was in the form of a data set. We work with data sets. We don't work with original sources directly. And that would be another way that someone could submit a work that they've done at a family history center, or they've done at a local genealogical center, or they've done in the county archive clerks, or maybe they have information from their own family. And if we can't publish it, hopefully we're going to be in a position to direct people to the right places, whether that's going to be some local family history genealogical place, or of course, there's some major online resources, Family Search and Ancestry and others that also do this kind of work.
He's Daryl Williams. He's the co-principal investigator with enslaved.org out of the University of Maryland. Daryl, it's been fascinating talking to you. It sounds like an incredible project, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this looks like just a little down the line here, because it's a very mature site, even at this point.
Yeah, Scott, I do appreciate the enthusiasm and the support, and I invite you and your listeners to participate, collaborate, challenge us, push us forward, and join us in this endeavor.
Thanks so much, Daryl, for coming on.
Thank you.
And coming up next, we've all heard about the 1890 census debacle. What exactly happened there, and what are the alternatives to an 1890 census? I'll talk to Rachel Darenthal from Legacy Tree Genealogist coming up next in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. Well, it's a new year, and we still have old problems to deal with. Hey, it's Fisher. It's Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And today we're going to talk about the 1890 census. Boy, we're 131 years out from that this year. And Rachel Darenthal is on the line with me. She's a project manager with our friends over at Legacy Tree Genealogist. She's located in southern New Jersey. And Rachel, you did a great article on the 1890 census. And I think it would be interesting to share with everybody exactly how we lost it in the first place, because it's been 100 years this year.
Yes, that is a great question. And I think for a lot of people in the genealogy field, if you've heard about the 1890 census, it kind of gets overlooked, the real saga that it went through before it was mostly destroyed. People know there was a fire in 1921 in the Commerce Building in Washington, D.C. It started in the basement, and the 1890 census happened to be outside of the fireproof vault in the basement. And so it basically took the majority of the hit from the fire. The records in the fireproof vault were also damaged by water, but for the most part, the 1890 census was damaged by the fire. And so there were varying reports initially about, it was completely destroyed. And then as it was assessed further, you start to see different reports from the National Genealogical Society and also from some of the people that worked for the Census Bureau. And it becomes clear as you're reading about this that there was still a significant amount of 1890 population schedules that were salvageable. There's not really a lot of information available about what happens from 1921 to about 1932 or so.
Weren't there demands by some people to have the whole thing destroyed as a result of this? What was the reasoning behind that?
I don't want to speak for them per se, because I'm not 100% sure what the reasoning was, but the Census Bureau put forward a proposal to destroy those records. Was the understanding of the National Genealogical Society and of other prominent attorneys in the area. And so how forceful that proposal was from the Census Bureau, or whether it was seriously being considered, I'm unsure. And I still haven't found records that say, how serious was this? But it was enough of a rumor or a legitimate concern for there to be an outcry from the Genealogical Society.
And as a result of that, it did not happen that they destroyed what was left. But we didn't wind up with a whole lot left, did we?
Right, but that's up for debate. So when you read different articles that have been put out by people about this and the reports, there could have been upwards of 41,000 schedules still available.
Really?
That's not what we have today.
No.
By any means. So the article that was written by Robert L. Dorman, The Creation and Destruction of the 1890 Federal Census, was written for the Society of American Archivists. And in that, he kind of talks about how this is really an archivist nightmare, right? This is like, we have these schedules, and a lot of them, not a lot, but a good amount are salvageable. They're waiting for insurance to come back to assess the damage. And so the records get moved to a warehouse. And according to Robert L. Dorman, they're moved to a brewery. And I haven't been able to confirm which is correct, or maybe they're one and the same, but they sit there, and then the head of the Census Bureau has them transferred back to the Census Bureau. And that's kind of the last we hear about what's happened with the remaining 1890 census schedules, which then kind of explains why in 1942, the National Archives acquires a portion of these records. They acquire 1890 census schedules when they thought that they were destroyed. And they get them when the Census Bureau is moving. And they're like, here you go. We found these 1890 population schedules. And then it happens again in 1953. And so it's interesting. It's okay, we have a note that says the 1890 census population schedules were destroyed by order of the Department of Commerce in 1934. So these must have gotten separated, or are there other schedules somewhere? I mean, I doubt it. It's been such a long time. But maybe something happened and there was a clear mismanagement, right, of these records.
Yeah, chain of custody, that type of thing.
Right. And that's kind of what Robert L. Dorman talks about more in depth from an archivist's point of view, how this kind of spurred a movement for the National Archives and for better record keeping on a national level.
And to protect those, yeah. So, Rachel, what does that leave us with now? What do we have now in terms of, I guess, pages, how many schedules, how many names do we have that remain from these original records? Do you know?
An exact number, I do not. What I can tell you is on Family Search's Wikipedia, there's a list of the available schedules, and it will tell you by what county and area in the county those schedules are available and for which states. So the exact number, I don't know of how many people and names, but in the article, we list the states that you could potentially, if your ancestors lived in these counties, that you could go to see if they happen to be in the 1890.
Yeah, it could be out there. That's true. Well, you know, the thing about census records is they're like lily pads through time, right? Every 10 years. And that's a pretty good gap in itself. But boy, when you're missing one, now the gap is 20 years. And we have to somehow make up the gap. And there are a lot of ways to do that.
There are. And for me, what I found to be the most helpful are looking through city directories, because they're more readily available than tax records. Well, in my experience, it's more common for you to see a city directory digitized than a tax record for a given area.
Yep.
And so city directories also give you the year by year. I mean, if you're lucky, some cities don't have city directories. The bigger the city, the more likely you're going to have it. But that's one of my favorite record groups to go to if I'm trying to break through an 1890s induced brick wall.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I've been really lucky because I've got all this family from New York City in 1890. My only family in America at that time was in New York City. So they weren't happy with the results of the 1890 population estimate for New York. So they sent the police out to do a whole other census. So it's called the police census. to find those missing people. And so we wound up with the whole other census of New York City. So if you have ancestry in New York, that's available for you, and it's hugely important.
It is. It is. And there's something else to consider, along with city directories, that is also a really good resource, is to see if your state, the state where your ancestor lived, had a state census between 1880 and 1900.
Yes.
And a lot of states did.
Sure.
And so it's something to look into. And if you're trying to figure out if your state did have that, again, I would point you to the Family Search Wikipedia. Go to that state's website and see what they have listed for censuses that are available.
And they usually did those on years that ended with a 5, so you could see them in 1885 or 1895 typically.
Correct. That is correct. And then if you're not having luck with any of those, then there is an 1890 veterans schedule. So a lot of these schedules survived the fire. And so basically what this is, it will tell you information about a veteran, most likely someone that served in the Civil War. So if you have an ancestor, a male ancestor that was of age during the Civil War, and you think he lived to 1890, that's worth looking into. Now, some of the schedules have been damaged or are not available or destroyed, but there are a large majority of them still available, and you can search for those for free at Family Search.
Yep. These are all just puzzle pieces, right? I mean, we're missing this huge census, and that in itself is a puzzle piece, to get information about people who were around at that time. But sometimes we just kind of have to fill in the gaps when we have a disaster like this. Really interesting stuff, Rachel. She did a great article on it. You can read it at legacytree.com. I appreciate your coming on, and we'll talk to you again down the line.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And coming up next, Dr. Henry Louis Gates joins us to fill us in on the latest upcoming episode on Finding Your Roots on PBS when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
At Legacy Tree Genealogists, we provide families like yours with the stories of your ancestors, a legacy that will be cherished for generations to come. Legacy Tree Genealogists provides genealogy research for clients worldwide, helping them discover their roots and personal history through records, narratives, and DNA analysis. And when your research requires access to on-site archives in the countries your ancestors lived, Legacy Tree Genealogists has researchers in more than 100 countries around the globe who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Legacy Tree Genealogists is the recommended research firm of genealogy industry leaders worldwide, including MyHeritage, 23andMe, and more. Check out what our clients have to say. Absolutely the best. They communicated through the entire process, and my report arrived on time. The story of my family with supporting documents was very fulfilling. Tom G. Google review. Don't wait any longer. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. Legacy Tree Genealogists. We do the research. You enjoy the discoveries.
Whether you're new to family history, a seasoned pro, or you've simply missed the event in years past, now's your chance to connect at Roots Tech Connect, the world's largest family history conference. For the first time ever, this event is 100% virtual and 100% free. That's right, virtual and free. Now you can discover your heritage from wherever you are. Imagine 3 full days of discovery, dozens of classes to choose from, taught by presenters from around the world, all from the comfort of your couch. Oh, and don't forget the exciting celebrations of music, food, dance, and traditions from around the globe. Enjoy inspiring keynote addresses and learn from top-notch speakers, and see yourself in the story of the human family. Discover your story. Discover Roots Tech Connect. Live online February 25th through 27th, 2021. Register for free at rootstech.org. That's Roots Tech Connect, free at rootstech.org. Well, genies, what a time we're all going through right now. And with all this time on our hands, you probably agree the best lemonade we can make out of this is to sharpen our genie axes and learn how to extend our family trees, gather more photos and documents, and discover those remarkable family stories our descendants can benefit from for generations. Well, I have more time now, too, and I want to help you learn what you need to know. That's why I've created a new Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. I'm so pleased that so many of you have already signed up and are helping us to create a supportive community of family history researchers. On this page, we can brainstorm and share ideas on how to tear down those brick walls that we all have. So feel free to join us. The Facebook page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Feel at home with others who live in our Genie world and want to make the most of this unique time. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Join us. Hey, there's nothing better than starting out the new year with brand new editions of Finding Your Roots on PBS. And Dr. Henry Louis Gates is back, and he's on the line with me right now. Hello, Dr. Gates. What do you got for us this week?
Hey, Scott, how are you doing, man?
I am doing so well. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year, my brother, and I hope you're staying safe and keeping sound and are healthy.
Doing the best I can. Lots of hot chocolate at this time of year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the next episode of Finding Your Roots is called Coming to America, and it features Norah O'Donnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Zach Posen. You know, Zach Posen is the fashion designer. Nancy Pelosi, of course, is Madam Speaker. And Norah O'Donnell is the news anchor of CBS Evening News. Norah's maternal grandmother was Mary Monaghan. She was the oldest of 9 children from a Catholic family in Protestant-controlled Belfast. And, of course, she grew up in extreme poverty, and she worked in a linen factory as a child in 1930 when she was 23. She came to America and found work at a hospital where she met Norah's grandfather, who was a fellow Irish immigrant named Edward O'Kane. And they married in 1937, the same year Mary gained her citizenship. But Scott, in 1942, Mary's citizenship was revoked because she had lied on her application, claiming that she was single when she had actually married Edward only months before.
Uh-oh.
Now, sound familiar? I mean, this is a big episode because of all the deportations of immigrants under both the Obama administration and the Trump administration, to tell you the truth. And the reason that she lied was that Edward was undocumented, and Mary was worried that he'd be deported. And amazed at this story, which Norah never heard before, she said, I think very few people would look at Norah O'Donnell on the CBS Evening News and think that her grandfather was an undocumented immigrant. You'd love the DNA. She's 100% from Ireland and Scotland, and she had one DNA cousin who's been in the series. I'll give you, let me see, a year if you guess who Norah O'Donnell's DNA cousin is.
I couldn't even imagine. Who is it?
Henry Louis Gates Jr.
Really? How far back do you tie? Do you know?
Well, no, but you remember that my great-great-grandfather was Irish.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obviously through that Irish connection that we tie. She almost fell out of her chair.
Yeah, I bet she did. I bet you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So our second guest is Madam Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And though Nancy's father, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., was a notable politician, he was first a congressman and then the mayor of Baltimore. Nancy feels that her mother, Annunziata Lombardi, doesn't get the credit she deserves for her life. Besides her role as First Lady of Baltimore, Annunziata also had an entrepreneurial side. She invented a vaporizer that used olive oil to create an early at-home facial called Velvex. And it was such a hit with her friends that Annunziata patented it and began selling it, had customers all across the country, until Nancy's father, a traditional Italian-American husband, insisted that his wife stop working. Isn't that amazing?
Different times.
Yeah, and her father was the first Italian mayor of Baltimore. So you can see that this episode is very much a parable, an allegory about the importance of immigration to the history of our country, but also how it was problematic. You know, there's so many people who think that all our ancestors just got off at Ellis Island and people said, welcome here. I mean, as we've seen in these two examples, it was enormously complicated. And some people left, some people were deported. A lot of people were given a hard time.
Right, right. Well, Dr. Gates, it's exciting to have another season back, and always fun to binge watch your shows. Really enjoy it. Of course, it's Tuesday nights on PBS. Check your local listings for the time and DVR it. Watch the show at your own convenience. Hey, Dr. Gates, talk to you again next week. Thanks so much.
Okay, my brother, you take care.
All right, David is back for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. And David, our first question of the new year comes from Dan in Excelsior, Minnesota. And he says, guys, my great uncle played in the early years of the NFL back in the 1920s. Is there any place I can look up his record? Love the show. Thank you, Dan. What do you say, David? Do you know anything about a site for that?
Well, you know, I do a lot with baseball, as you do, but there is actually a pro football reference website that I stumbled upon a little while back, and it's at www.pro-football-reference.com. And you can look at players back to the 1920s and all the early teams, and there's a lot of great information there.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. It's got all the players alphabetically. If you click on players, it'll go A through Z, and usually it just gives you a little taste of the greats that have a last name that start with those letters. But when you click on the letter itself, it's entirely alphabetical, and it's long for every single letter there. And then you can click on that person, and you can see their entire record, who they played for, what position they played, and what kind of stats they built up.
Well, you know, and that's true. And one of the things is a lot of players go by nicknames. Like there was a player back in the 30s, Mac Gladney. Now, he had only 3 games with the St. Louis team that he played for. But it also tells me that he was born the 22nd of May, 1909 in Turley, Missouri, and died March 1985 in Rolla, Missouri. So, I mean, you're getting genealogical information. So even if you're not a football fan, here's another place that you can go for a Guild of One Name Studies surname project for your last name you're researching. So it makes me want to look up Jack Lambert right now.
Ah, well, that's a thought, isn't it? You know, you look at these names and these records, and you can also find sometimes there were siblings that played. This is another rabbit hole, David. I mean, this is the bottom line. This is just like the baseball reference information. And if you had a relative who played sports, there might be another one for basketball, for as far as I know. But you got to look at these things. It's really a lot of fun.
It really is. And now I know everything about Jack Lambert, and he will be someone I should probably stop saying is my distant cousin.
By the way, this reference site also lists everything that happened every season, all the leaders for those seasons, who won the divisions, who won the postseason. You can go and look at the draft records. You know, was your relative drafted? Maybe they didn't even ever make it to the NFL, but they were drafted. This goes all the way back. Can you believe this, Dave? All the way back to 1936.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And then they list, you know, who was picked first. The very first draft pick in 1936 was some guy named Jay Berwanger. And he played college ball in Chicago, and he was picked by Philadelphia. And I don't know, did he ever make it? It doesn't even look like he ever made it to the NFL. So you got to take a look at this. It's pretty interesting stuff, and that might answer your question. I have no doubt in my mind, by the way, Dan, that you will find your great uncle in here, whoever that may be.
Well, and the other thing, you know what their jersey number is. So you know what you can get for a holiday gift for your family because that's your great uncle.
Yeah, wouldn't that be a great way to go? Well, great question. And, of course, if for anybody who has a question for Ask Us Anything, you can just email us at askusanything@extremegenes.com. David, it's great to have you back for the new year, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, talk to you then.
All right. Thank you, my friend. Well, that's our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks once again to Daryl Williams from enslaved.org, this new website that's funneling data from all kinds of websites about enslaved people from all over the world. If you missed any of it, of course, catch the podcast. And to Rachel Darenthal, the project manager at Legacy Tree Genealogist, talking about the 1890 census records. What's left? How do you substitute for those? It's a big gap, but if you missed any of that, of course, catch the podcast. It's on iTunes, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, or all over the place. Talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.